Alright, hi team. So this video is going to cover how to interact with these blob objects and actually get the information we want and need in order to create some sort of visuals of our own and to actually use these sort of blob bits of information that we get from the framework and then do something hopefully interesting with that. So the way we're going to go about this is we're going to create a new function which will handle kind of creating the image that we're interested in, our projected image per se, right? But since we're still in the development phase, what we're going to do is we're going to take the projected image and we're going to display it down in this sort of area right here instead of creating a only showing the projected image, which is what we would want to do once we transition over to the finished product, right, and the finished working prototype. So the way that we're going to go about this is that in our void draw loop right here in the main portion of the program, we're going to add our function. We're going to call it projector display for now. And then it's going to complain that it doesn't exist, which is fine, which makes sense. It doesn't exist yet, but let's implement it. Let's make it exist. So we'll go to our display functions tab right here, and at the very end we'll add a new function, and we'll call it void projector display. Oops. Awesome. And then let's add some comments to this function and explain what we want it to do and what we're going to do with it. So what we're going to do is we're going to take each blob and draw a line from the center of the blob to each other blob. And if this is sort of confusing or whatever, hopefully it'll make sense once we get down to implementing it a little bit more. So the first weird thing that we have to do when we want to draw to a specific portion of the screen is we have to utilize what's called pushing and popping of the matrix. So there's functions called push matrix, and then there's also a function called pop matrix. And what these functions do is that they allow us to sort of address the entire canvas, the entire processing canvas, this entire screen in general ways. And we can translate the entire screen, we can move it around, and it makes it easier for us to sort of reposition the canvas and then draw using 0, 0 as our basis instead of adding all these complicated numbers to figure out where we are. So again, hopefully this makes sense once we spend a little bit more time doing it. So the first thing we want to do is we want to push the matrix, and which sort of gives us a it allows us to operate entirely on the entire canvas instead of just sort of operating on individual things that we're drawing. So what we want to do is we want to translate the canvas, so we want to move the entire canvas by a certain amount so that our 0, 0 is right here instead of our 0, 0 being up here, which is how it currently is. So in order to get this X position, I just so happen to know that if we take the width of the entire canvas that we're creating, and then if we subtract the width of our source file, which is the width of our connect image, that will bring us here. So the width of the entire canvas is this, and then the width of the connect image is actually all 4 of these blocks combined. So if we subtract those two, that'll kind of bring us to right here along this line in the x-axis. And then what we want to do is we also want to tell it how much we want to translate in terms of the y-axis, which is the height of the connect image, which is the height of this, right, which will bring us down there. Awesome. So now we translated ourselves to make this point right here 0, 0. And if this isn't clear, then we can create like a rectangle, for instance, and then we can set its coordinates as 0, 0, and then we can create its width as source.width, and then source.height for its height. And then maybe we'll make a fill color for it, so we'll give it a fill of green. Oops. But then maybe we want it to be like not a super crazy green, so we'll give it 125. All right, so run this again, and then you'll see that it'll draw that rectangle pretty much where we expect it, with the x coordinate right there, and it'll take up this whole area. So now we have our canvas right there, which is source width by source height, and then 0, 0 starts right there. And then we can start drawing to this location. Cool. So let's get rid of this rectangle in the fill for now. That was just to make sure that we got the translate correct. So what we want to do is actually draw lines. So we want to draw lines that connect all the blobs of the connected scene together, right? So when we're dealing with lines, instead of setting a fill color, we actually set a stroke color. So we can do that by just saying stroke, and it's the same thing where we just enter in a color. So I'll do like this color. And then we also have stroke weight, which will determine how wide these lines are. And I'll just give it kind of an arbitrary number 4 for now, and we'll mess around with it later if it's weird. Cool. So now we set up the color and the width of the lines that we're going to be drawing. Now we actually need to get the information about the XY coordinates of all the blobs and to actually draw lines. So the first thing to note is that we can only draw lines to connect blobs if we have more than one blob, right? So then the first thing that we want to check is we want to see if how many blobs we have, right? To make sure we have more than one, basically. And the way we can do that is we can use a conditional if statement. We can ask if blob list.size, which will return the number of blobs that are in this array of blobs. If that is greater than 1, then basically continue. So we want to put the rest of our code in this if statement that just makes sure that we have more than one blob, right? In your case, you may want to check to see that there's 3 blobs, if there's 3 people in that area before you initiate. It's kind of up to you, right? The next thing that we want to do is we need a few for loops. We actually need 2 for loops in order to get what we want here. So the first one will determine. We'll take our first blob, the blob that we are concerned with drawing lines to the other blobs, right? So we'll say for int I equals 0, and then I is less than blob list.size, and then I plus plus. Cool. And then now that we have that blob, we actually need another for loop to then go and grab all the other blobs that are in the image. And maybe it's less clear now because there's only like really 1 or 2 blobs. So let's turn the blur size down on the example so we get more blobs. Maybe we'll make the threshold so it does less. And then we'll decrease the min blob size. All right, there we go. So now we have tons of blobs, right? So now we need, say we're this blob right here, we need to draw a line to every single one of the other blobs. So we need to have another for loop that then will grab each one of the other blobs. So we can say for int t, and you have to make sure that this one is not int I, or else it'll overwrite the other one and things will be bad. T is less than blob list.size, and then we say t plus plus. All right, cool. So now we have I, and also we have t. And then I and t will represent our the indexes of the 2 different blobs we want to operate on. So now let's actually draw our lines. So processing has this line function, and then it takes in 4 arguments: the x position and the y position of the start, as well as the x position and y position of the end. So let's give it that. So what we need to do is we need to have blob list dot pose dot position dot x, except for we want blob list I. So this is the first one. So we want to take the first blob. Oh, and then I'm sorry. So this we have to do get I. It's not a regular list. It's sort of this array. So we have to use this get syntax. So it's a blob list get I position of x. All right, cool. And I'm just going to copy this. And then we want blob list get I position of y. And then, so that's the beginning of it. And then for the end, we want blob list get, but instead of I, we want t now, pose x, and then one more, blob list, and then we want to get t, and then we want pose y. Cool. And then it should be that simple. So let's run this code, and then now we should see all of our blobs will appear, but we will draw a line that will connect all of our blobs, the center of all the blobs. And it will display this below the 4 camera inputs that we programmed in earlier, right? All right, so get my hands up. Oh, and see we have that teal line on the bottom that's connecting the 2, right there. So let's do the same things before. Let's turn the blur size pretty much down. Let's turn the min blob size down. Oh, and there we go. We have lines that connect all the different blobs there, right? Kind of cool. So you're going to want to do this, right? You need to draw a direct line from the center of one blob to all the other blobs. The other piece of information that you want is you want to know how far these blobs are away from each other, right? So let's just print out that information for now. And there's actually a function in processing called the dist function, which will determine the distance between one xy position and another xy position. So we can just copy all of the coordinates for our line right here and then paste it into this distance function, and then it will tell us basically how long each of these lines are. And then maybe I'm going to go in here. I'm not super stoked on this color. Let's tweak the color slightly, and let's make it so that they're not really very wide. All right, and we'll run it again. Oops, and then this indent's sort of a little funky, so okay. So now it'll be the same thing as before. The lines will be different colors, so now we have this maybe slightly nicer purple color. Too many blobs. I'll bring the blur size sort of. Alright, so we have all of our blobs there, and then you can see down in processing here, it's printing out all this information about the distances from all these different blobs. Cool. So you will have to insert some logic in here to be like, okay, well this is the distance between these two people, it's the distance between those two people. So this doesn't give you absolutely everything you need, but it should give you pretty much like most of what you need to at least start building the framework. And you can start mapping things hopefully to audio or whatever. I'll try to keep on making some videos to support you guys, and this is nice exercise for me because it gives me an opportunity to sort of build this framework more, and then hopefully kind of ease the transition into the Connect for people in the future. So hang in there, we'll make it through. You guys, yeah, hopefully this is helpful, and more to come.